The gentle hum of the air conditioning in my office was very different from the storm of thoughts in my head. My name is Anna, and I'm a 28-year-old lawyer. My life now is very different from my chaotic childhood, which I keep hidden even from my closest friends. The quiet of my office was broken by the ringing of my phone. It was an unknown number, but it felt strangely familiar. I picked up the phone with a nervous hand. "Speaking," I said, trying to sound professional and careful. "Anna, it's your father," said the voice. There was a nervousness in his voice that made me feel uneasy. A chill ran through me. It had been over 10 years since I last heard that voice. A voice that used to mean safety and love but now symbolized betrayal and pain. "Why are you calling me?" I asked, my voice sharp as it cut through the silence after he introduced himself. "I'm in trouble, Anna. I need your help with money," he said, his voice cracking a little. Even though he might have been sincere, his request made me feel angry and resentful. "You need my help now, after all these years?" I replied, feeling a mix of disbelief and anger. "Yes, I wouldn't ask if it wasn't serious." "I'm really in a tough spot," he continued, sounding more desperate. "You stopped being my father a long time ago. You can't just call me now and expect me to help," I said firmly, my voice cold and steady. There was a long pause on the line, filled with a heavy silence that felt like a huge, unbridgeable gap between us. "Anna, please. I'm still your dad," he said, trying weakly to reconnect with me. The word dad felt strange and almost shocking. "A dad? You lost that title when you chose her over me," I replied, my words filled with years of buried anger and hurt. "You're my daughter. I thought," he began, sounding both pleading and desperate. "You thought wrong," I interrupted, cutting him off. "You made your choice years ago, and now I've made mine." "Anna, I am sorry. I just need this one favor," he said. The word sorry echoed in my office, sounding empty and meaningless. "Sorry doesn't change the past. I can't help you," I said firmly, and then I hung up the phone. Before I turned 10, my childhood was full of love and laughter. My parents and I lived happily in our small rented house. My mom was a joyful and kind person, and she filled our days with warmth and our nights with stories and dreams. My dad used to be playful and caring, spending evenings playing games with me or teaching me about the world. Our home felt like a happy place where every day was an adventure and every night a sweet dream. But our happy life ended suddenly when my mom passed away unexpectedly. The house that was once full of laughter and love became silent, filled only with memories. I remember walking through the rooms, each one a reminder that she was gone. The loss was too much to bear, not just for me but for my dad too, who had lost the love of his life. But to my surprise and confusion, his grief seemed to fade quickly. Just a few months later, he brought home Marissa, a woman who was going to play a big role in our lives. I remember the day he introduced her, a day that changed my childhood forever. "Anna, this is Marissa. She's going to be staying with us," my dad said one evening. His voice didn't have the warmth I was used to hearing. I looked at Marissa, hoping to see some kindness or friendliness in her, but I found none. She seemed imposing, and her gaze was cold and calculating from the very first moment. I felt the change in the air, a shift that filled me with a sense of dread I couldn't explain. "Hello, Anna," Marissa said. Her voice was smooth but lacked real emotion. Her smile didn't comfort me, it seemed to hide something sinister. In the days that followed, the house felt different, as if the walls themselves were shrinking away from her presence. The happy memories of the past seemed to fade, replaced by a lingering unease that settled everywhere. I kept looking at Marissa, trying to find something nice or kind about her, but her every look and gesture seemed filled with an unspoken hostility. It became clear that she wasn't here to fill the void my mother had left but to create a new story where I didn't belong. As I watched her move around our home, a home that once felt safe and happy, I couldn't shake the feeling that her arrival marked the start of something bad. The way she looked at me with eyes that seemed to hide more than they showed made me worry about the future. After Marissa arrived, it felt like I was living in a nightmare I couldn't escape. The house, once filled with my mother's laughter and love, now felt cold and unwelcoming. Marissa's presence cast a shadow over everything, turning even simple daily routines into struggles. One morning, as I sat down for breakfast, I noticed my food tasted unusually salty. "Marissa, did you put too much salt in this?" I asked hesitantly. "Oh, did I? It must have been a mistake. Just eat it, Anna. Don't be so picky," she replied, her tone dismissive and almost mocking. The incidents became more frequent and mean-spirited. I remember finding my clothes ruined after they were washed. Marissa, my clothes are all faded. What happened? I asked one day, holding up my favorite dress, now discolored and unwearable. She glanced at it and shrugged nonchalantly. Maybe the washing machine is acting up, or perhaps it's time you stop wearing such childish clothes. I felt a surge of frustration but knew arguing would only make things worse. Feeling helpless, I turned to my dad, hoping he would see through her act. Dad, Marissa is ruining my things. She's always mean to me, I said one evening, my voice trembling with anger and sadness. But my dad's reaction was not what I had hoped for. Anna, you're just imagining things. Marissa is trying her best to fit into our family. Stop causing trouble, my dad said firmly, and his words hurt deeply. Every day felt like a struggle, dealing with Marissa's hostility and my dad's indifference. The home that used to be a safe haven now felt like a prison. I began spending more time in my room, trying to escape the constant tension. Living in that unhappy house made me feel alone and misunderstood. The safety and happiness that once filled our home were replaced by fear and anxiety. I missed the past when my mom's smile could brighten up the whole room, so different from the darkness that now filled every corner. Living with Marissa became a daily challenge of avoiding her and putting up with her cruelty. Her hostility towards me started with small things like pinching my arm or twisting my stomach, always in places I could hide under my clothes. The pain was sharp and a constant reminder of how helpless I felt. I started coming up with ways to avoid her, always being careful about where she was in the house. I would take long routes to my room or wait until she was busy before I moved around. Even with these efforts, there were times when she caught me off guard, and those moments always ended in pain. One day, while I was quietly reading in the living room, Marissa walked in and, for no reason, pinched my arm hard, her nails digging into my skin. I winced in pain but kept myself from crying out. She looked at me with a cold, smug smile before walking away. During one of Grandma's rare visits, she noticed how I was moving cautiously and flinching whenever Marissa's voice echoed through the house. Anna, is everything okay at home? Grandma asked, sounding worried. I looked at her, wanting to tell her the truth but afraid and wanting to protect her from worry. Yes, Grandma, everything's fine, just a lot of schoolwork, I lied, forcing a smile. She seemed unsure but didn't press further. I felt guilty for lying to her but couldn't stand the thought of causing her any stress. That evening, as Grandma was leaving, I saw Marissa watching from the window with a satisfied look on her face. It was clear she enjoyed having control over me, that she could hurt me and get away with it. Her smug expression was a clear sign that she saw herself as the one in charge and me as a powerless victim in her cruel game. I went to my room, feeling trapped in a cycle of abuse and silence. The physical pain from Marissa's pinches and twists was tough, but the emotional pain was even worse. School was my escape, a place where I could briefly forget the misery at home. But even at school, the shadows of my home life began to follow me. Mrs. Thompson, my kind-hearted teacher who always encouraged us, noticed something was wrong. One day, as I handed in my homework, she gently took my wrist and saw the bruises on my arm. Anna, what happened here? These look like bruises, she said, sounding worried. I quickly pulled my arm back, covering the bruises with my sleeve. It's nothing, Mrs. Thompson. I fell while playing. I lied, not meeting her eyes. Mrs. Thompson didn't seem convinced. Anna, if something is wrong or if someone is hurting you, you can tell me. It's important to speak up, she said, looking at me with concern. I wanted to tell Mrs. Thompson everything about Marissa and how I lived in fear, but I couldn't find the words. Instead, I forced a smile and said, Really, Mrs. Thompson, I'm fine. It was just a silly accident. She looked at me thoughtfully, then nodded slowly. Okay, Anna, but remember, my door is always open. You're not alone, she said with a reassuring smile. I nodded, feeling a lump in my throat. Her kindness made it even harder to keep up the pretense that everything was okay. As I walked home, Mrs. Thompson's words echoed in my mind. I felt grateful for her concern but also deeply lonely, carrying my burdens alone. The idea of telling the truth about my home life was frightening. I worried about what Marissa might do if she found out I had talked to someone. That night at dinner, I was quiet, lost in thoughts about Mrs. Thompson's offer to help. Marissa noticed my silence. Why so quiet tonight, Anna? Cat got your tongue? She asked, her tone mocking. I just shook my head and kept eating, trying to make myself as small and invisible as possible. After dinner, lying in bed, I felt overwhelmed by my situation. Mrs. Thompson's concern showed me that people cared, but I was still too afraid to speak up. I was stuck between wanting to tell someone and fearing what Marissa might do if she found out. The day Mrs. Thompson decided to involve my father was filled with anxiety for me. I sat nervously in the principal's office, worried about how my father would react. When he finally arrived, he looked stern and embarrassed. "What's going on, Anna? Why did the school call me here?" he asked sharply as he walked in. I looked at Mrs. Thompson, hoping for support. Trying to steady my voice, I said, "Dad, I." Mrs. Thompson saw. She saw the bruises, feeling his intense gaze on me. Before I could explain more, he interrupted, his anger clear. "Bruises? What are you talking about? Are you making up stories again?" Mrs. Thompson spoke up, her voice calm but firm. "Mr. Smith, I'm worried about Anna. The bruises on her arm don't seem accidental. We need to look into this." My father's face grew red with anger. "She's perfectly safe at home. Anna, are you spreading lies about our family?" he asked, clearly disappointed in me. The tears I had been holding back started to fall. "It's not lies, Dad. Marissa, she's been hurting me." I finally told the truth, but he looked completely shocked. "Marissa? That's absurd. She's been nothing but kind to you. I won't let you accuse her like this," my father said. "But Dad, it's the truth," I cried, trying to make him believe me. He stood up abruptly, losing patience. "That's enough. Tell Mrs. Thompson you made it all up." I turned to Mrs. Thompson and repeated his words. She nodded but didn't say anything. When we got home, my father locked me in my room without another word. Through the door, I could hear Marissa's voice, pretending to be concerned. "I told you she's just seeking attention," she said. I sat on my bed, feeling completely alone and hopeless. The one person I thought I could always rely on had turned away from me. My room, which used to be my safe place, now felt like a prison. I lay there, thinking about everything that had happened. The physical pain from Marissa was hard, but the real hurt came from being disbelieved and punished by my own father. It was a harsh realization that the person who was supposed to protect and love me was now causing me the most pain. The days I spent locked in my room were some of the darkest I'd ever known. Feeling trapped and alone, I knew my only hope was my grandmother. She was always kind and loving, but I had never wanted to burden her with my troubles. One evening, when I was sure Marissa and my father were busy, I gathered the courage to call my grandmother. My hands were shaking as I dialed her number. "Hello," her familiar, warm voice answered. "Grandma, it's me, Anna," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "Anna, my dear, how are you?" she asked, with genuine care in her voice. Tears filled my eyes as I said, "Grandma, I need help. Can I come and stay with you for a while?" There was a pause on the other end. "What's wrong, Anna? Did something happen?" I took a deep breath and let the words spill out. "It's Marissa. She's been hurting me, and Dad won't believe me. I don't know what to do." I could hear my grandmother's concern as she quickly said, "Of course, dear, come right over." The next day, my grandmother arrived. She was small, but her presence was powerful. She confronted my father with surprising strength. "John, I'm taking Anna with me. She's not safe here," she said firmly. My father, surprised, tried to argue. "Mom, you can't just take her. She's my daughter." "Your daughter whom you're failing to protect," she shot back. "I won't stand by and let her suffer." Marissa tried to stop her. "She's just a child making up stories. You can't believe her over us." Grandma looked at Marissa with a steely gaze. "I can see a scared child when I see one. Anna is coming with me. If you try to stop me, I'll take this to the authorities." Seeing that he was outmatched, my father didn't argue anymore. As I packed my things, I noticed Marissa's defiant look change to one of defeat. Leaving the house with my grandmother, I felt a huge weight lift off my shoulders. For the first time in months, I felt safe. The car ride to Grandma's was quiet, but her presence was comforting. When we arrived, she turned to me and said, "You're safe now, Anna. You don't have to worry anymore." In Grandma's house, I found the love and security that had been missing from my life. It was a place where I could heal and regain my strength. The difference between her warm home and my father's cold house was huge. For the first time in a long while, I felt like I could finally breathe, free from the fear and anxiety that had taken over my life. Years had passed since I left my father's house to live with my grandmother. Her home had been a safe haven full of love and healing. But time brought change, and my beloved grandmother passed away, leaving the huge emptiness. At her funeral, my father and Marissa showed up. Their faces showed fake sadness and hidden excitement. They seemed more interested in what they might get from her passing than truly mourning her loss. After the funeral, when we gathered at Grandma's house, Marissa quickly made her move. "Well, Anna, I guess you'll need to find a new place to live now. This house and everything in it belongs to your father now," she said, her voice barely hiding her pleasure. My father nodded, looking around as if planning what to do with the house. I couldn't help but smile, which seemed to confuse them. "Actually, you're wrong," I said confidently, surprising them with my tone. "What do you mean?" my father asked, looking confused. I took a deep breath, enjoying the moment. "Grandma left a will. She left the house and a lot of money to me," I'd explained, watching their faces go from confused to shocked. "But you're just a child. I'm your father. I should be in charge of your inheritance," my father stammered, clearly feeling entitled. Marissa added, her voice sharp, "Yes, until you're of age, your father will manage your property." Their reactions were almost funny. "You didn't even bother to wish me a happy birthday. I turned 18 a month ago. I'm legally an adult now. I make my own decisions," I said firmly, enjoying the look of realization on their faces. My father's expression changed from shock to anger and then to a desperate plea. "Anna, you can't do this. We're your family," he said, trying to convince me. I looked at them, old memories flooding back. "You stopped being my family a long time ago," I said calmly. Marissa stepped forward, now begging. "Please let us stay in the house. We have nowhere else to go. We didn't renew our lease." I shook my head. "This is my house now. You'll have to find somewhere else to live." As they left, I felt years of pain and neglect lift from my shoulders. I stood in the house that was now mine, a house full of my grandmother's love, and felt a sense of closure. The past still echoed in the house, but the future was mine to shape. I sat there with my phone in hand, feeling a mix of emotions, anger, betrayal, and a sense of injustice. But through it all, there was also a feeling of strength, a reminder of the resilience that had helped me through the toughest times.
"All right, everyone's presentations are done," Nick, the manager, said as he tried to move the discussion forward. "Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something." Nick interrupted me and began to speak. "There's apparently someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. Meetings should be for employees only." "Absolutely right." His lackey, Mike, of course, agreed with Nick. "I'm leaving." After leaving the meeting room, I started to shut down my computer. I noticed that an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking, there's no point in speaking up, no one will listen, I went home quietly. The next day, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. He was staring at his computer screen, his face pale. "Nick, is something wrong?" Mike looked at the screen with him. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Knowing the reason for Mike's distress, I thought to myself, serves them right. My name is Adam. My mother passed away when I was in the 9th grade, and I was raised by my father. Well, you could hardly call it being raised. After my mother passed, my father changed. He drowned his sorrows in alcohol, and though he still went to work, he squandered our living expenses on horse racing. Because of that, I had to start working part-time as soon as I entered high school. Every month, I went to the convenience store with bills in hand that couldn't be auto-deducted from my father's account. Even though I endured it because I didn't want to be alone, I reached my limit in my second year of high school and dropped out. I found a live-in job at a distant inn. Thank you for everything. The day I left home, my father, still staring at the TV, spoke. Take care. That was our last conversation. Back then, 18 wasn't the age of majority, so I needed my father's permission to work, and I couldn't hide my place of employment. Yet, my father never visited me even once. I kept working just to survive, and before I knew it, I was 42. Years of hard work paid off, and I was transferred to the headquarters. I was thrilled to be recognized by the company, as I thought I'd be working in the field until retirement due to my lack of formal education. Listen up. Our work can change the future of our employees. Don't drag us down. On my first day after the transfer, Nick, dressed in an expensive suit, spoke sternly. There was a reason for this. Our inn was located in a prominent tourist destination, known so well that everyone in the state could sing its commercial jingle. At its peak, we had 5 locations within the state. But that was long ago. Due to financial difficulties and aging facilities, only the place where I had worked for many years and the original establishment remained. I was prepared to lose my job anytime, but now there was a glimmer of hope. With the rise of social media, the tourist area where the inn was located started gaining attention again. Depending on how hard the sales department, where I was transferred, worked, we could either thrive or be forced to give up this prime location to the new hotel chains continuously popping up. For Nick, who had switched careers from another industry to strengthen our sales, this was a battle he couldn't afford to lose. I understood why he had to be strict. "I will do my best." Nick sneered at my enthusiastic declaration. "Did you not hear what I said?" "I'm sorry." I thought I was listening carefully. Out of habit from years of customer service, I apologized reflexively, though I had no idea what had offended him. Someone was watching me with a smirk. In this department, there are those who are expected to excel and those who have been shoved here because they have nowhere else to go. You are the latter. It was Mike, the section chief. He's 7 years younger, at 35. But he was called to headquarters much earlier than I was and had been moving around within the headquarters ever since. I'm not jealous, but I can't accept that he's my boss. Graduating from a prestigious university, he has an unusually high pride and caused many problems as a newbie, making things very difficult for me when I was the front desk leader. When I found out Mike was transferred to the sales department a month before me, I was disheartened. Mike is right. With just a middle school diploma, there's not much you can do. Don't even think about achieving results. As if I didn't exist, Nick remarked, "I'm thirsty." Mike eagerly ran to the coffee maker. It seems Mike is Nick's lackey. I regretted being happy about my transfer to headquarters, wishing I had stayed on site forever. Send a direct mail to every company on this list by the end of the day. Nick only assigned me tasks that even a new graduate could handle. What? There are over 1,000 companies. You want me to send to all of them by today? Yes, if you and your fellow misfits split the work, even those with nowhere else to go should finish by today. I glanced at the employees typing away expressionlessly. They were worn out from customer service, only thinking about leaving on time, or were women reassigned after having children, with zero motivation for work. Even Sam, a new graduate from the same university as Mike, who was supposed to be among the expected achievers, had no enthusiasm for the job, having joined the company wanting to do customer service. "I don't care what they say, I plan to quit any time," he said. Only Nick and Mike were highly motivated, making all the decisions between the two of them. I originally only wanted to work at the inn to survive and had no particular attachment to this job. I swallowed my words, thinking I had no right to reprimand them. About a month after the transfer, Nick told us with a frustrated look. "To commemorate the 50th anniversary, we've decided to create a plan exclusive for one group per day." Originally, Mike and I were supposed to come up with it, but our president, Mr. Thompson, insists on hearing everyone's opinions. "So, you all get a chance." As Nick explained, Mike began handing out prints. "Make sure not to embarrass Nick. If your ideas are half-baked, you'll have to redo them." It seemed that they had printed his handwritten notes by Mr. Thompson, which included several questions and a section for free responses. It made sense why Nick had to seek our input, given that all responses had to be submitted to Mr. Thompson. We were given a week to think about it, and a meeting was scheduled to compile our ideas. My plan is to let guests enjoy both the old and modern America. Nick began the presentations. Guests would watch a master confectioner at a nearby traditional sweet shop make sweets in front of them. The welcome drink would be premium tea in a bottle. Nick's plan was certainly attractive. After his presentation, Nick called on us to present in the order we were seated. Just as I stood up for my turn. "All right, everyone's presentations are done." "Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something." Nick interrupted me. "There's someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer." He was likely talking about me. I joined the company as a part-timer and was made a full-time employee when I turned 20. That was 20 years ago, so Nick and Mike probably had no chance to know until recently. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. After that, Nick kept creating opportunities to solicit everyone's opinions, purposefully excluding me from speaking. The meeting unexpectedly heated up and went past the scheduled end time. A few people asked to leave, and the discussion continued with the remaining few. Still here? Normally, you'd leave in that situation. Though I had no attachment to the job initially, hearing kind words from customers made me want to make them happier. For someone like me, with nowhere to go, the inn was my home and customer service was my life. I felt pathetic about my current self. I'm leaving. I left the conference room and started shutting down my computer. I noticed an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking no one would listen to what I had to say anyway, I quietly went home. The next day, while preparing the DM as instructed, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. In his haste to stand up, he hit his knee on the desk. He stared at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick! What's wrong? Mike, thinking he should be the first to rush over, approached Nick while still wearing his coat. He peered at the screen with Nick. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Who is responsible for this company? Nick, more irritated than ever, asked, and Mike answered without checking. Probably Sam. Sam wasn't there because he was attending a morning training session for new hires. Nick gave up on getting angry and returned his gaze to the screen. They were looking at an email that arrived right after the end of the working day yesterday. Apparently, no one, including me, had checked it before leaving. The email was from a large company that used us for their annual employee trips. The president and executives of that company also frequently used our services personally. President of the company, Mr. Mason himself had declared that neither he nor his company would ever use our services again. Well, some companies cancel their employee trips or stop using our services due to financial struggles. Let's just move on. Mike kept wiping the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. Knowing why Mike was so agitated, I quietly watched their interaction. Do you know how much revenue we get from that company? We can find other guests to fill the rooms, but we'll lose the banquet costs, gift shop revenue, rental car fees, and more. Moreover, the gifts were supposed to be prepared by the traditional confectionery shop involved in Nick's proposed plan. If it's known that we incurred such a huge loss at this critical time, Nick's position in the company would be jeopardized. Nick took a deep breath, seemingly trying to calm himself. All right, Mike. Go to New York right now and apologize to Mr. Mason. What? You're coming with me, right? I have urgent work to do. I trust you, which is why I'm entrusting this to you. Please. Mike, believing Nick's sincerity, agreed with a determined look on his face, saying, yes. That's Nick for you. Even if Mike went to apologize, Nick would shift all the blame onto him if the client didn't change their mind. Well, it was Mike's fault to begin with, so it served him right. About 3 hours later, Sam answered a call from somewhere and repeatedly apologized, saying, I'm very sorry. Everyone watched to see what was happening. After ending the call, he informed Nick with a weary tone. When Mike arrived at the client's company, he only made things worse, further infuriating Mr. Mason. He was demanding, get his boss here immediately. It was no wonder Sam was exhausted, dealing with such a call right after returning from training. What is that idiot doing? All right, Adam, you're coming with me. If sacrificing Mike didn't work, then I must be next. Normally, I'd want to refuse at all costs, but I saw an opportunity in this situation. If I can be of assistance, I'd be happy to join you. I obediently followed Nick, and we flew to New York. When we introduced ourselves at the reception, it became clear how serious the situation was, as the receptionist personally escorted us to the president's office. Angry voices leaked through the door, making both Nick and me uneasy. Excuse me. I'm Nick, the supervisor. I understand my subordinate has caused you trouble, and I deeply apologize. Nick, with his experience in the corporate world, knew enough to offer an apology before excuses. However, his customer service skills left much to be desired. I sighed as I saw Mike trembling like a small dog in the corner of the room. What kind of training are you giving your subordinates? Mr. Mason glared at Nick with a red face. The intensity of his gaze made even Nick take a step back. Regrettably, I joined this company only 2 years ago and was unaware of Mike's issues. I should have identified his shortcomings sooner. Indeed. I should have realized sooner. No sensible person would come to apologize and then give a lengthy presentation on the drawbacks of not using their in. Nick froze, his mouth slightly open. Suspecting the worst, I picked up the documents that had fallen to the floor. It seemed Mike hastily prepared these documents on the plane, listing the disadvantages. Disadvantage 1: if you change the venue for the company trip, employees might suspect it's for cost-cutting reasons, leading to a negative impression. Reading it aloud half-jokingly, Nick snatched the papers from my hand and checked the contents with a furious expression. Among the stack of documents was a receipt from a nearby convenience store's copy machine. I felt a pang of dread, hoping he hadn't shown the receipt as well. What do you think he said when I asked what kind of nerve he had to do this? I'm very sorry. Faced with the dire situation, Nick must have thought there was nothing left to do but apologize. In a voice smaller than I'd ever heard from him, he uttered words of apology. He said, "I'm a Harvard graduate. I don't believe I said anything wrong." Mike! What have you done? Forgetting his plan to pin the blame on Mike, Nick yelled loudly, even in front of Mr. Mason. "I didn't do anything wrong." "You're still saying that? Look at him." Mike pointed at me with a shaking hand. "I was assigned to headquarters in my 20s and now I'm a section chief. This guy only made it to headquarters at 42. Everything I've done proves I was right. So why are we losing the contract?" Having said his piece, Mike collapsed to the floor. "Of course. You were sent there because you had nowhere else to go." Mike never expected to hear such words from someone he looked down upon. He lunged at me, and Nick hurriedly stepped in to stop him. "Mr. Thompson told me Mike is a quick thinker, and to take good care of him." There's no way he was pushed aside. "Don't make things worse here. He didn't say quick thinker, he said only quick-witted, didn't he?" I don't remember that part. I recalled the many troubles Mike caused when he was a newbie. When Mike was on the front line, his pride was so high that he never apologized to customers. Customer service, especially in our job, doesn't work alone. It brings both good and bad situations. If the front staff or housekeepers made mistakes, or the cleaning company didn't properly clean a room, one had to apologize to the customers regardless of personal fault. Mike, in such situations, would never apologize, insisting he wasn't at fault. This often angered customers, and as the front desk leader, I frequently had to apologize on his behalf. He caused complaints and disrupted operations, which is why he was quickly moved to headquarters. In departments where he didn't interact directly with customers, his quick thinking was beneficial and things went well. But it seemed his flaws were starting to show. Corporate reservations are supposed to be entered into the system by the sales representative. But a quick check yesterday revealed that more than 10 items were missing from the client's reservation. The handover document clearly stated what needed to be prepared. Why didn't you enter it into the system? Why do we have to give them special treatment? Filling rooms near the banquet hall, setting up all the food in advance. Specifying the brand of wine, they're too demanding. No wonder he always angered customers, I thought, feeling a headache coming on. Grouping them in rooms near the banquet hall is for our benefit too. It makes it easier for the staff to set up beds and serve breakfast since everyone's schedule is synchronized. As for the other requests, Mr. Mason suggested them to lighten our load. I didn't know that. Nick finally seemed to realize that Mike was the one who had angered the client. What did you say to them? I just told them we wouldn't give them special treatment anymore. We shouldn't waste effort on things that don't bring in money. I was utterly exasperated at his lack of understanding of customer service. Of course, we shouldn't comply with unreasonable demands. But carrying over successful practices from past stays makes customers feel remembered and enhances their experience. Good memories encourage repeat visits. That's part of our job. I looked down at Mike, who was sitting on the floor. In our job, nothing is a waste. Mr. Thompson likely moved you to the sales department, hoping you'd finally understand this. How do you think he feels now that you failed to meet his expectations? Mike, tears in his eyes, fled the president's office. I was amazed he still hadn't apologized. You have it tough, Adam. It's okay, we're all employees of the same company. I deeply apologize for this disrespectful incident. Especially after all the care you've shown us. If it weren't for you, Adam, I really would have stopped staying here. When I heard you were moving to the sales department, I was willing to reconsider if you handled it. Seeing us talk so amicably, Nick's face contorted. Do you two know each other? Adam's service is excellent. I always requested him specifically. Normally, we don't accept specific staff requests, but we made an exception for Mr. Mason, adjusting my shifts accordingly. He had personally stayed at our hotel just before my transfer, and during casual conversation, I mentioned, I'm moving to the sales department soon. If I hadn't told him then, things could have been much worse. Please continue to take care of us. I look forward to it. On the return flight, Nick awkwardly offered me a can of beer. It's still working hours. Of course, I had no intention of forgiving him for a single beer. Nick might try to pin everything on Mike and avoid any consequences. While pondering this, a startling fact came to light. Nick, the tea bottles for the plan have arrived. I handed Nick a bottle labeled with our inn's name. They look good. What are you talking about? These are plastic bottles. I had assumed we would use the trendy, high-end bottling tea. But what arrived were ordinary plastic bottles of tea with customized labels. The only unique aspect was the label, which had the inn's name, making it look customized. Upon further investigation, I discovered that a substantial amount of money was set to be paid to the tea company. It was priced like bottling tea. Does this plastic bottle really cost $100 each? The tea inside is specially blended for us. The extra cost is for that. Wouldn't it be better to use another tea company? Or is there a specific reason we must use this one? As Nick continued to make excuses, I showed him a printed email. I informed the tea company's president, Mr. Mitchell, that we discovered irregular payments and he confessed. He said you two were high school classmates and planned to split the extra money. That idiot. Why did he confess? That's not important. You should worry about yourself, this could turn into a police matter. Opening the bottle cap, I suggested. How about calming down with this tea? It supposedly has a relaxing effect. Nick drank the tea frantically. In the following days, decisions were made about their fates. Mike was reassigned to the General Affairs Department, with no chance of transfer or promotion, as per Mr. Thompson's orders. As for Nick, since the payment to the tea company hadn't yet been made, he narrowly avoided legal trouble. Instead, he was encouraged to leave the company, and to avoid further complications, Nick submitted his resignation. Rumor has it that connections between HR departments have made it difficult for him to find new employment. Even though it was good to have those two gone, something unexpected happened in the sales department. Everyone became motivated and united in refining the 50th anniversary plan. In the end, my plan was adopted. We collaborated with the Tourist Information Center to provide personalized guides. The plan, tailored to the number of guests, was truly special for the 50th anniversary. Hey, is Adam's family coming to stay? I immediately booked that special plan for my family. Sam noticed it on the reservation list and quickly picked up on it. Yes, I'm inviting my father. That's great. I might invite my parents too. I lacked the courage to face my father just as Adam. But here, with the confidence Mr. Mason praised, I felt ready. The 50th anniversary plan was a perfect opportunity to reconnect with my father. I hoped to bring back the days when we could laugh together as we once did.